The Law and You. A look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You. Presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC. And brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. This is program number 820. Coming to you on Monday the 7th of March 2016. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, the Parliament Bill Part 2. And I know that last program I had indicated that I would be dealing with Can 1 on this program, but inasmuch as I did not complete last week's program, and inasmuch as so many people have asked me to repeat the program, I thought I would complete the Parliament bill on this program and do the program on Can 1 at the next presentation of the Law and You, which will be in 2 weeks' time, namely Monday the 21st of March. Because next Monday, the 14th of March, will be a public holiday, National Heroes Day. So, the Can 1 program will come to you a week after next Monday, DV, the 21st of March, and I will finish up the parliamentary bill on this program. But before I get into the topic, let me express my deepest condolences to all families which have suffered bereavements in the past few days, and I want to mention 2 families in particular. Firstly, the family of my brother Joel Abraham. Joel has lost his father very sadly, because it's just a few months ago that his mother passed away. So, Joel, my brother, I know what it is to lose parents, but to lose them in such quick succession is particularly painful. I know you are a strong person, a man of deep faith, and I pray that the Lord will see you and the rest of the family through this very sad bereavement. I got to know Joel Abraham very intimately when we were both commissioners on the Law Review Commission. And Joel served not only on the CRC, not the Law Review Commission, the Constitutional Review Commission, the CRC, but he also served on the CRSC, the Constitutional Reform Steering Committee. Joel has been a very hard worker, very insightful, very enterprising young man, and I wish you and the rest of the family all the very best. I would also like to issue special condolences to my brother Sam Goodluck on the passing of his spouse. I only got to hear the news last week, Friday, and I was extremely saddened to hear of the passing of your wife, Sylvia. She was a client of mine at one time, a lady so full of life, so full of wit, and I know you, my brother, will miss her very dearly. And let me say once again, my heart goes out to the mothers of those 2 men from the Lomans area who were found murdered. Read the accounts that they gave in the newspapers, and I could enter into their feelings. And it was extremely heartbreaking to hear of the shooting death of the German visitor on board the yacht in Wallaby. I heard the comments made by the Honorable Prime Minister, and I want to enter into his feelings. Some people may not understand the implications when a foreigner is murdered in your country. I heard some people saying, well, he doesn't issue those sorts of remarks when a local is murdered. But a prime minister has a special responsibility when a national of another country is murdered in his country. He has a responsibility to do what he can diplomatically to assuage the feelings of the foreign government from which the murdered person would have come. You could recall some years ago when Sir James was Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a young lady, Daru from Dominica, was found murdered at Queen's Drive. And our Prime Minister issued condolences to the Prime Minister and government and people of Dominica. This is normal diplomatic procedure. So people mustn't think that, oh, the Prime Minister did it because it's a German and why he doesn't do it when nationals are murdered. We have to understand that there are certain obligations on heads of government to act in certain ways and to make certain expressions of sympathy and regret when things like this happen. So let us don't hear any more of this talk comparing the death of the murder of a national and that of a visitor. And I hope we all understand the implications for our tourism. Not good. Not good at all. Excuse me. The Parliament Bill 2016. Well, I want to thank those persons who had comments to make to me on last week's presentation on the Parliament Bill. And the bill has been published in all the newspapers last week, Friday. That has followed a procedure in which on previous occasions bills have been published in their entirety for public scrutiny and comment, and I want to commend the authorities on having published this one. Even as I repeat my plea to the government not to proceed with the debate and passage of this bill, because once the bill is debated, it will be passed, or I should say, it would be passed if debated, because governments are governments because they have a majority of members in the House of Assembly, and when the government takes a bill to Parliament, it passes by virtue of the government majority. So let us hope this will not be debated or passed. In other words, I hope it doesn't come up for its second reading. Now, I'm sorry, as I said in my preliminary comments, that it is not expedient for me to repeat the whole of last week's program, as some people have urged me to do. But I will recap for the benefit of those who missed the program, the salient points I made, and perhaps I should direct your attention to the Searchlight newspaper of last Friday. Searchlight has a very accurate synopsis of my comments on the bill. So if you really want to know what I said, look at last week's Searchlight. And I want to thank the editor of Searchlight for carrying that article. But basically, my objection to the bill springs from my appreciation of the need for avenues of protest not to be closed or not to be stifled to an unreasonable degree. And even though I disagree with the opposition in their act of boycotting the budget debate, I have to acknowledge that boycotting Parliament is one means of legitimate protest. Now, some people pretend they don't understand the difference between a legitimate protest and an unjustified protest. The difference is this. Those who are against a particular protest could say the protest is not justified. But to be against a particular protest doesn't mean that you want to deny the right of the protesters to make their protest. They have a constitutional right to protest certain things. That is the right of a citizen. But those who disagree with them would also have the right to disagree with them. So you have the right to disagree with somebody, but you don't have the right to stop them giving expression to their disagreement and their protest. One philosopher put it this way: I may not agree, and I quote, I may not agree with what you have said, but I will defend with my life your right to say so. Unquote. Shall I repeat? The philosopher said, listen, I may not agree with you, but I will defend your right to say what you have said. And I hope we all understand the nature of that. So there is nothing inconsistent with disagreeing with the opposition in boycotting Parliament and upholding their right to boycott as a means of protesting. And I hope we understand that, because rights flow from the Constitution. From a theological sense, some would say rights flow from God. Well, that's theology. But from a constitutional point of view, the Constitution guarantees to all persons who are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Note, our Constitution doesn't reserve fundamental rights for Vincentians. Our Constitution recognizes that persons in St. Vincent and the Grenadines have certain rights under the Constitution, whether they belong here or not. And among those rights are the rights to freely express yourself. Now, all rights are subject to the law. The only unqualified right you will find in our Constitution is the right not to be subjected to torture or cruel or unusual punishment or treatment. So our Constitution says, under no circumstances can torture be justified. But all the other rights are subject to qualifications. Your right would extend up to the boundaries of the law. The law sets limits on the enjoyment of rights. So, for example, the right to protest is limited by the necessity for such protest to be peaceful and lawful. So you don't have the right to riot and call that a protest. I'm not saying that anybody has rioted in St. Vincent in recent times. We had riots in the 1935 situation. Now, from that perspective, I have drawn the personal conclusion, and this is my opinion, but it's an opinion which I'm prepared to defend as strongly as I can, that the imposition by the bill of a financial penalty for boycotting the House for more than one consecutive sitting is not justified at all. What I have said is that the present rules of the House of Assembly set out a procedure by which if a member is absent for 3 sittings or from 3 meetings, let me use the terminology used in the rules, without having an excuse acceptable to the Speaker, that member is entitled to receive a warning letter from the Speaker. And if after having received the warning letter, that member is absent for 3 more meetings consecutively, without an excuse satisfactory to the Speaker, that member loses his or her seat. If it is an elected member, the seat is lost. If it is a senator, the appointment is automatically revoked. So I suggested that a proportionate measure may be to reduce the number of unauthorized absences from 6 to a lesser number. But the idea of imposing a fine, and I call it a fine because when the legislation proposes that a person should lose 50% of their emoluments for that month, that is really a 50% fine. I feel that that is disproportionate and legally objectionable in that there is no right of appeal against what essentially would be a penal measure of a financial nature. So that, and coupled with other features of the bill, I'm recapping what I said the last time and putting it in other words for greater understanding. For one thing, there would be difficulty in determining what constitutes an absence from the house, short of a person physically not going, because the bill does not define that. So I asked the question on the last program: if a person goes to Parliament in the morning and spends only a limited amount of time and then goes home, is that person deemed to have been present or absent? Or absent from the sitting? So that the bill would be difficult to interpret and to apply. But the bill would place an enormous strain on the speaker, who gets a letter from a member excusing his or her absence, as to whether that letter constitutes a satisfactory explanation for the absence, and whether the absence could then be excused. But I want to come to a final clause in the bill, which I did not get the chance, time-wise, and I thank the management of SVG-TV for giving me a little extra time last Monday, and I would not overstray this time. Clause 7 of the bill is highly questionable, particularly 7.1. And this is what it says: the minister may by order amend the schedule. What that really means is that the schedule says, for absence from more than one consecutive sittings of the House without the leave of the Speaker, the penalty is a deduction of 50% of the monthly emoluments paid to the member. That's what the schedule said. You're absent for more than one consecutive sittings, whatever one consecutive means, and I rather think it means 2 at least. You lose 50% of your salary. Now, what clause 7, subclause 1 says is that the minister, meaning the Prime Minister, can change that 50% by simply making an order published in the Gazette without any parliamentary debate or intervention. So theoretically, the Prime Minister would be able to increase that 50%. Now, theoretically, the Prime Minister would also be able to decrease it. But let us be realistic. Could you see the Prime Minister saying, well, look, 50%, if the bill is passed, 50% is too high, I'm going to adjust that to 30 or 40% or 20%? No. If the Prime Minister is going to interfere with that percentage at all, it's going to be increased. So to give the Prime Minister the power by himself, by an order made by him in cabinet, albeit, to increase the 50% to a higher percentage is legally objectionable. You normally do not, by subsidiary legislation, that is, legislation which doesn't have to pass through Parliament again, increase a fine. Normally, in financial measures, a Minister of Finance has a lot of discretion. There are lots of regulations setting out tariffs as revenue-raising measures, which the Minister of Finance has a discretion to increase or decrease or adjust as he sees fit. But outside revenue measures, you would hardly find punitive measures susceptible to subsidiary legislation, that is, to being changed by a minister of government without a parliamentary debate. So to that extent, clause 7.1 would be objectionable. Never mind, it says, an order made pursuant to that shall be subject to negative resolution in the House of Assembly. That means that the Prime Minister makes it. unless a resolution is passed to set it aside, it remains the law. So it doesn't require a positive resolution which would then be debated. It simply says, if nobody passes a resolution against it, it stands. Now the opposition are going to hardly be in a position to pass a resolution quarreling with a measure like that, for the simple reason that the opportunities for private members, and opposition members are all private members in that they're not ministers, the opportunities for them to get resolutions debated in Parliament are limited, let alone to have a negative resolution passed, setting aside an order made by the Prime Minister to adjust the schedule to the Parliament bill. So that I think after due consideration, I hope the members of the government would realize this is a measure which is going to create more disaffection, more ill will, more acrimony, more agitation, and more of everything negative. And therefore it should be avoided, which it can easily be avoided by leaving it where it is in the select committee. Because the opposition are clearly not going to name anybody to the select committee. If I were in the opposition, why would I want to name somebody to a select committee to discuss a measure of this kind? I would consider it a total waste of time, and I wouldn't go. So in due course, if the government wants to go through with it, it will come out of committee, go back to Parliament, get its second reading, debate, third reading, passed into law, and then there will be negative consequences. Let me put it as broadly as that. And all of that could and should be avoided. We can do without the extra agitation, which this measure will undoubtedly create. As I said 2 programs ago, a word to the wise should be sufficient. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, that is all for this program. Do have a happy National Heroes Day, and I look forward to being of further service to you the following Monday, the 21st of March 2016 DV, for another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. May the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.